Hi World Literature students, this is Miss Castillo here again with another screencast. This time I'll be talking to you about what you need to know about Taming of the Shrew by William Shakespeare. We're going to be going through the same PowerPoint you went through in class. So if you were absent, this is a good time to get the notes. You will need the Taming of the Shrew background notes handout to copy down all the necessary information, or if you were here and just want to review that information, this is a good way to do so. So let's get started. First of all, you need to know the setting. This is where Shakespeare was from. He was from a town outside of London. For the location, I would like for you to write England, because that is where London is located. England borders Wales on the west, and it borders Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Ireland in the northwest. England during this time was its own country. Today, England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland make up what is called Great Britain. You may have heard of that. This entire island here is also part of the continent of Europe. As you saw from the video, London in the 1500s was a little risque, and it was wild, and it was dangerous. Those are the three words that you need to write down in number 1. It was risque, wild, and dangerous because of the prostitution that went on during this time there, because of all the thievery that was going on during this time, and because of things like bear baiting, which people would use as a way to entertain themselves. There was a lot of controversy around the atmosphere of the city. Specifically, that controversy came from the Puritans, a religious people who disapproved of the rowdy, risque life and activities of the people who lived in London. That now brings us to William Shakespeare. Who was he? Well, first of all, you need to know that he was born on the 26th of April in 1564. Now, when I say born, I mean that that's when he was baptized. During this time, when the date of your baptism was the day that officially went down on record. So we consider that his birthday. For his family, he had a wife whose name is Anne Hathaway, kind of like the actress today, but not the actress today. She was his wife for a few years, but he actually left her to go to London to become a playwright. He became famous for 2 types of literature, for his plays and for his sonnets. Sonnets are a type of poetry. That brings us to the theater in Elizabethan England. Shakespeare was part of the Chamberlain's Men, or later the King's Men. And the King's Men / Chamberlain's Men were a group of male theater actors who acted in London. The Globe, which you see in these 2 pictures and which you saw in one of the videos, is the theater where Shakespeare's plays were acted on the stage by the Lord's Men. So as you can see, the Globe is called the Globe because it's circular, and you could see the play from wherever you were sitting. The stage, as you can see, is here, and people would be able to watch it from one of 3 different levels. Now, during Shakespeare's time, there was a hierarchy, which means there were social classes. England during this time was a monarchy. That means it was run by a king and queen. The queen's name was Queen Elizabeth I. She had absolute power over all the people in England, and her approval was necessary for a playhouse like the Globe or a playwright like Shakespeare to be a success. Under the Queen were the nobility. The nobility had 4 things that made them powerful and second in the hierarchy. They had titles. We'll talk more about that in a second. They had land. They had money. And they had control. These 4 things combined gave them enough power to be second in the hierarchy. To expand on titles, there are a couple of example titles that I'm sure many of you have heard. If you hear people referenced by these titles, you know that they were part of the nobility. There are dukes. Female version of a duke is a duchess, D-U-C-H-E-S-S. There are also lords and there are ladies. If you've read Romeo and Juliet, you may remember that Romeo and Juliet's parents were referred to as Lord and Lady Capulet or Lord and Lady Montague. That showed that they were part of the nobility. All the rest of the people were working people, and they were beneath the nobility. These people were often poor and did not have opportunities for social advancement. So once you were stuck in one place, that's it. That's where you were for the rest of your life. So we're going to start with the gentry. The gentry, which you need to write down in A under working classes, mainly were like the soldiers, so like the knights. Then you had the merchants, who were kind of like the salespeople. Then you had the yeomanry, who were the craftspeople or the farmers. They were the ones who still had some ownership over their own craft. And finally, you had the laborers, who essentially worked with their hands and worked for everybody else. During this time, women in all of these social classes, their ultimate goal was to get married and have a husband. Now, unless they were part of the monarchy or the nobility, they were uneducated. Now we're going to start talking about some key terms that you need to know to understand the play that we're about to read. The first key term is a character. A character, they're just simply the people in the play. So we're going to have many characters in the play that we're about to read, The Taming of the Shrew. There's also a lot of dialogue between these characters. Dialogue is a conversation between them. That brings us to external monologue. An external monologue is when one character gives a speech to other characters. Conversely, there's also internal monologue, when one character speaks or thinks to himself. You also have a soliloquy. A soliloquy is kind of like an external monologue, except that while the external monologue is given to characters, while the external monologue is given to characters, a soliloquy is when one character speaks to the audience, so kind of leaves the characters behind. The characters can't hear the soliloquy, only the audience does. There are also stage directions in a play, which tell the actors where to move on the stage, and a cast, which is the list of all the characters. There are also some key literary terms that you need to know. The first is characterization. Characterization takes the form of adjectives. You characterize a character in a play or in a text based on how the author portrays that character based on descriptions. Also, we're going to be talking a lot about theme. Theme is a broad and universal idea, message, or moral of a story. For example, Romeo and Juliet. One theme that appeared in Romeo and Juliet was the theme of love, and you saw how people express love to one another. That is something we can all relate to. Setting is another important literary term. It is the time, place, and circumstances under which an event occurs. And I apologize, there's my typo. That should say an event. There's also internal conflict, which is a character's conflict with him or herself. So whenever a character is debating what to do, a decision, that is an internal conflict. Conversely, there's also external conflict. That's when a character has conflict with either another character or a group within the story. So again, Romeo and Juliet, you saw the Montagues and the Capulets, they had an external conflict with one another. Shakespeare wrote many types of plays, but primarily he wrote comedies and tragedies. The difference between a comedy and tragedy is a comedy has a happy ending. We're going to be reading a comedy. The Taming of the Shrew, the ending is considered to be happy. It ends in marriage, and there are many characters. It also deals with societal themes, so themes that we can all relate to. And it is considered to be more true to real life. A tragedy, in contrast, has a sad ending. So think Romeo and Juliet. It ends in death. It usually focuses on one individual or hero, and it deals more with an ideal situation that usually doesn't come true, which is sometimes what leads to the death of the main character. The play we'll be reading is Taming of the Shrew. Like I said before, Taming of the Shrew is a comedy. So there will be a happy ending, there'll be marriage, it'll have many characters. You need to know what shrew and tame mean. Shrew refers to a woman of violent temper and speech, and to tame means to put under control or to train. The main characters in the play the main women are Catherine and Bianca. Catherine is the shrew. She's the one that's going to need to be tamed. She is the eldest daughter of a man named Baptista, B-A-P-T-I-S-T-A. Tista. There are two primary ways to characterize Catherine. She speaks her mind, and she is strong-willed, which is kind of a fancy way to say she's hard-headed. Bianca is her younger sister. So Bianca is the youngest daughter of Baptista. She cannot marry into her sister does. This is what Baptista has decided. And she is described as beautiful and lovely. So you can see the difference between them here in these two images. You're also going to meet Petruchio. Petruchio is a wealthy gentleman from Verona. So he's come to visit the town of Padna, which is where Bianca and Catherine live. He comes to Padna to marry rich and tries to go after Catherine for the money. Lucentio, he is in love with Bianca, but has to compete with all these other guys who are also in love with Bianca, because remember, she's lovely and pretty. He is the one who he hires Petruchio to tame Catherine so that Petruchio and Catherine can end up married and Lucentio can end up with Bianca. So those are the main four, but there are a few others. They're called the supporting characters. Baptista, as I've already said, is the father of both girls. He refuses to allow Bianca to marry if Catherine doesn't. Tranio is Lucentio's servant. Remember, Lucentio is in love with Bianca. He pretends to be Lucentio, while Lucentio pretends to be Bianca's tutor. If you saw 10 Things I Hate About You, you should start making some connections here. Gremio and Hortensio are also two men who want to marry Bianca. Grumio is a servant to Petruchio. He's kind of the fool of the play, the clown. Boindello is another of Lucentio's servants. So that tells you that Lucentio has a little bit of money if he has a couple of servants. Christopher Sly is a drunkard for whom this play is acted as a trick. Last but not least, there are some important themes that you need to know about for this play. The first is the theme of feminism. That refers to the role of women and how they are portrayed within a text or a movie. And then there is also the individual versus society, which refers to the impact of society on personal happiness. So how does society influence what we think it means to be happy? Thank you for listening. I hope this has helped you review some key information or be introduced to key information if you hadn't been introduced to it already. If you have any questions, please find your English teacher. Have a good day.